So Victor, since last time we talked, it's about 4 or 5 years, and uh, since last time I've been to Phoenix, Arizona, I'm in love with like everything that Exos did, including like translating for like Brock Christopher.
Mhm.
So, for those who didn't know you that much, can you like introduce yourself for the audience?
Sure. Yeah, it is great to see you again after all that time. It's been awesome to see what you've been doing. So congrats on that to start. But yeah, Victor Hall. I'm been based here in the U.S. my entire career, and for about 23 years have been in the performance industry, whether it was as a coach, as a teacher or instructor, and a manager of facilities. So a little bit of everything, jack of all trades, they say sometimes, when it comes to performance facilities and performance training. But I've been with Exos specifically for about 13 years. Started at Exos as a performance manager and a performance coach, working with the U.S. military. And that was an awesome experience. Definitely different than working and training athletes, but still a human body to work with and improve performance. So it was a great puzzle to help solve. So I started with Exos on the military side of our business, and then started working to our performance centers in California, and then now in Arizona. Been here in Arizona for about 6 years. That's of course where you and I met when I was teaching a course, which I would do in between my day job of helping to manage the facility, support the staff, and also when I have time, coach athletes directly.
Nice, nice. So, uh, I know that the the industry have changed a lot since you like joined the strength and conditioning world. So there's been like velocity based training, there's been like force plates, that kind of stuff. And I know Exos has since last time I've been there, I know Exos has changed a little bit, but overall, can you like explain to us the world has changed so fast. How exactly did like Exos deal with the changes from more of a like let's say collecting data using like sports science, that kind of stuff.
You're absolutely right. If I think back to about 1,000 years ago when I started coaching, what it feels like 1,000 years, things like force plates, that would have been in a very rare, like university lab, um, or maybe like an Olympic center. Not even pro sports were using it. Definitely not college weight rooms where I got started. And so in the last 10, 15 years, yeah, it became really accessible. So even for Exos, which started 20 years ago or so, it wasn't a major piece of what we were doing. We've always been really, really interested and dedicated towards knowing the individual and being able to personalize a training program and solutions across, like as you said, performance training and physical therapy and nutrition. So those have been important for us to dig deep into the person to know more about them. The more we can know, the better. And so then recently, as you mentioned, the technology side and sports science has really taken off. And those types of technology are a lot more accessible. And so we've now started to do that as well. In the last 3 or 4 years, we have dedicated a lot of time towards things like you're mentioning, force plates, and body composition technology as well. And that's helping us not just on the training side, but of course, the return to sport play with previous injuries and that type of thing, working with our physical therapists. So we're implementing across the board. Um, the challenge is, as you know, you can measure just about anything and everything. And so it's almost overwhelming the amount of information available at the fingertips, sometimes literally just at your phone as a biomechanical analysis just from a simple iPhone video. So we've got all this information at our fingertips. And so, like I was saying, the last 4 or 5 years, we've been really dedicated to honing in on what measurements matter. And to be honest, that's the challenge ahead for all of the industry still. Even after now a solid decade of many people having this information, the challenge is still to figure out what matters for each individual. What might matter for me to improve my sports performance or physical health might be different than you. And so we should probably be measuring different things if different things matter. So that's been where we kind of currently stand now. We're collecting a solid swath of data that give us a good overview of the athlete's ability to generate force, absorb force in a horizontal direction, which is pretty much, your force plate stuff. But even that is a sliver, right? That's only one small view of what an athlete might need to do on a field or court. And so as we do that, we're still trying to find out the connection points between something as simple as concentric impulse and does it help you improve your ability to separate from an opponent on the soccer field? And that might be different for you or me. So again, it's definitely a challenge. We're still honing it in, but we are in that arena now, where in the past we were focused on things like very simple movement quality analyses, like functional movement screens, like I'm sure you're aware of, and even just simple speed testing. So gates and split testing, the ability to accelerate from 10 yards to 20, et cetera, et cetera. So our testing repertoire is quite more in depth than what you probably remember, but we're not there yet.
So, since last time I've been to Exos, I've been inviting like Keegan Ross, JR, and Eric Danberg on the podcast. Basically, I'm in love with Exos. But do you think that using the force plate changes the system you use, the system you like screening athlete?
It does not change it, in my opinion. It makes it better. Because as you, I'm sure, know, the system is built off of finding personalized information. So the more accurate or valid information you're gathering for any given individual, it just informs the decision process for the coach within the framework or the system even better. So, I think that's one of the main reasons we wanted to do it, right? Is to improve our coaching knowledge. It definitely is not to change it. It's only to improve it. And we look at it that way. It's a supplement. At the end of the day, we still have to be great coaches and decision makers and relating to our clients. So that has to happen. As part of that, bring in more information. It only makes it better. It doesn't replace 20 years of coaching intuition. It only improves it.
Nice. So, enough about the force split.
Okay.
I remember that when I was in Arizona, there's a you were teaching us about like Olympic weightlifting. So how exactly do Exos or do you guys implement like Olympic weightlifting in your training?
Okay. I knew you were going to ask this question because I do remember us going over our Olympic lifting practical as the course. And what you probably remember then is that there's a special place in my heart for Olympic weightlifting. I really enjoy it personally because, as you might remember, I was a competitive weightlifter for 5 or 6 years. Nothing at like the international level, but it was something that I was okay at and I really enjoyed. So because of that, we might need to record a part 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to really get into Olympic lifting. But your question is phrased correctly, because even though I feel that way about Olympic weightlifting and the sport of it, if I separate the sport of Olympic weightlifting into a tool used to improve the athletic performance of a field and court athlete, that's actually a lot easier. So I do separate them. That's one of the first things that the way I look at it. And all of our coaches at Exos understand that. The other component is, and this is hard for me to say, Olympic weightlifting as a tool for improving athletic performance isn't for everybody. It may not be the best tool for every field and court athlete. And yeah, it hurts me to say that, but that's probably the truth. So, one of the first decisions we make as coaches at Exos is what is the right tool for the job? And when it comes to Olympic weightlifting, it can be a great tool for developing lower body power, training the nervous system to apply a lot of force in a short amount of time. And that is, as a general ability, can be very beneficial for a lot of situations, but not all situations. So one is the sport and demand. Is there a need there to use that tool? That's the first thing. In most, particularly Western sports, the answer is probably yes. A more explosive athlete in general is probably a higher performing athlete. The other, though, is more of an individual decision, meaning, does it help? Is that individual ready for it? And does it help that individual? Not just the sport that they play or the position that they play, but will it help that particular style of play for an individual? And are they ready? So I view it, and I think we both view it, as an advanced training tool. And because it is an advanced training tool that has some risks involved around safety, an athlete should be progressed properly and be then qualified, almost pre-qualified, to do a full-on Olympic weightlifting derivative as part of their training. So if I think about adding it into a training program, is it right for the sport? Is it right for the person? And are they ready? Then we would decide to use it. When we use it, we're probably using it in a very basic form compared to what a Olympic weightlifting athlete as a competitive athlete would use. And that might look like something like hang power cleans, power snatch from the floor. I would even throw in some dumbbell variations and kind of consider that part of an Olympic lifting derivative. So think a single arm dumbbell snatch. Those are all things that we could easily progress, teach around, and use as a training tool to develop lower body power, full body power, the ability to produce force in a short amount of time that could help a basketball player, but would come well short of helping a competitive Olympic weightlifter. So I think that's how I would generally answer your question. And maybe there's some more detail you want there.
So I know I asked the same question like 4 or 5 years ago, but can you give us some ratio about like what do you think for the let's say the NFL player, let's say like wide receiver, like if they squat like 200 pounds, how much would they be like doing the cleans and snatch?
I think if someone has a pretty good background and a basic and safe technical model for the clean, then something like your strength levels of a back squat matter to how much weight I should be using to clean. However, if you're new to the clean, if you don't have a lot of experience with a power clean, and you tell me your squat numbers, it might be a while before that squat number means anything for the clean weight. So I think I would start there. So let's say in your example, an NFL or American football wide receiver is going to be you want to work a power clean in. And they also squat about 200 pounds. I would be probably looking for then, and if we're thinking back squat, right? I would be looking somewhere in the range of 80 to 90% of that particular weight that athlete should be able to work with and work up towards. 200 pounds is not a lot. So that tells me that there's some strength levels that would need to get worked on as a prerequisite to work with Olympic lifts. So, even in that example, I might say, maybe you should wait on the Olympic lifts and get really strong in the back squat, the front squat, and deadlift. Then let's talk about Olympic weightlifting, because you're using those strength levels as a base to train power. So I would think about it that way.
Nice. I I remember talking to you about like Olympic weightlifting at the hallway about like increasing vertical jump, and that can change my view on how to implement like Olympic weightlifting in my training. And not I'm not gonna be disrespectful for anyone in the strength and conditioning world, but uh like last time you mentioned, if I want to like train my vertical jump, they should probably jump more. If I want to train their like 40-yard dash, they should probably sprint more instead of just focusing on uh Olympic weightlifting. Can you like explain to us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, the basic thought is adhering to the said principle, specific adaptation to impose demand. You want to be as specific as possible to the task that you want to improve, right? And so when I think about jumping higher, running faster, those are my primary tools. So if I want to get better at jumping, of course, I should jump more. And we start looking at various loading parameters within metrics, jumping, and similar for sprinting. But that's not to say Olympic weightlifting and the benefits of the nervous system and force production wouldn't help, but I wouldn't, put all of my emphasis on it. Some of that comes from my own personal experience. Prior to even starting Olympic weightlifting, I jumped a lot. I did a lot of plyometric training. I played basketball recreationally, but as a young athlete, I could jump really high. Okay. And I really liked that about my own athleticism. So I was good at it. So I did it a lot. Right. And I got to a point where I was jumping very high, using plyometrics and jumping through the sport of basketball. Then I was introduced to Olympic weightlifting. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to use this as part of my approach. I'll be more explosive. So I started doing about a year's worth of training with Olympic weightlifting and progressively got better and better and better, using more weight, and becoming more explosive with a barbell in my hands. And I retested my vertical jump. Eric, what do you think happened? After a year of Olympic weightlifting and a lot of hard work, my vertical jump went down. Why is that? Well, when you think about competing demands of time, as I started spending more time with Olympic weightlifting, I spent less time jumping, playing basketball. And so I lost that specificity. And so even though my clean and Olympic weightlifting performance went up, my vertical jump went down because I lost the specificity. And the only other thing I would add there, particularly around jumping and sprinting, both of those are independent skills. You get good at the timing, the coordination, etc., and you get good at that by practicing. So just because you use something basic and foundational like power development, you still have to layer in the skill, timing, coordination, and athleticism of something like a vertical jump or a counter movement jump. So that's really where a lot of my advice to you was back then, was not to get too caught up in that, and probably then use more of a combo approach, combined approach. Olympic lifting plus plyometrics, Olympic lifting plus sprinting. And that was, a mistake that I had made in my own training.
Do you remember that it was the same story you told me in the hallway?
Oh yeah. Well, I've been doing this for a long time. It's probably the same story I've told about 20 times to people like that. So I got it down.
Nice, nice. So, uh, I know that after COVID, you guys have probably had more like athletes besides American football. I mean, Exos already have like tons of American football, pro American football players train at Exos, or the if co or college football want to get into the NFL, and also like Major League Baseball player. But I know recently there's more and more like NBA player goes into like the Exos. Am I right? Or is it
You're right about that. You're definitely right about that. More NBA players, especially with our good friend Dr. Keegan Ross.
so? Uh, uh, from training's perspective, do you think that because the sport demands a little bit different, so do you think the way you guys train or the way you guys program it's gonna be different?
It definitely is different. Like we talked a little bit about before, there's still the framework. And the framework is meant to have flexibility to emphasize one part more than the other, but not necessarily lose one of the components. So as we go through all those components, something like linear absolute speed development might be really important for, as your previous example with an NFL receiver, American football receiver. But if I'm an NBA center, not as important. And so because of that, one emphasis might go down while another emphasis could go up. And that's just in the sport demands. I'll keep coming back to the individual needs probably outweigh the sport demand. But either way, we're able to kind of maneuver these levers to emphasize one, de-emphasize another, but still maintain a very comprehensive and holistic approach that we're hitting everything. We're creating balance in a way that is most needed for the individual. So yes, NBA athlete training, that 2-hour session throughout the week with a Exos coach is going to look different than what it might look like in our NFL offseason program.
Nice, nice. So the next thing I want to discuss is about like speed. I know like 40-yard dash is probably the main event for like running back, wide receiver gonna attend. It makes them like if they run a good time, they probably get higher draft. If they want run not that good, they're they're probably not gonna be able to get that early draft. So and I know like we discussed, we haven't really like uh get involved that much in the combine prep, but still, like, what are your thoughts on like planning for the 40-yard dash?
Yeah. 40-yard dash, I think you can look at it, even though it ends up being a test for, as you mentioned, the NFL combine and the folks getting ready to go and do their best so they can improve their draft status. So it's a test. And it's a measurement of linear speed for sure. So when you look at it from a test perspective, you can approach it in sections and really dissect it in a way that might be similar with like track and field races. So you kind of look at it that way. Although it's not always the same as, running fast in a football game. And I think coaches and players know that, but they still go through the process of improving their 40-yard dash time because it is so linked with football speed. Now, that said, the way you look at it is a lot like you might break down a 100-meter dash. There's going to be a start. And so when you look at that start component, track and field, it's happening in blocks, obviously. So when it's for the 40-yard dash, specifically for football, we're not going to be in blocks, but foot positioning, where your hand is, the angles between your torso your hips, and your feet, all of those really matter. We're going to be pretty scientific to put people in positions to explode out and be very powerful right out of the gate. So there's the start. We're breaking it down in that way. Then you have this acceleration phase. And that's going to be a little bit different for each person. But in general, it's happening over the first 10 to 15 yards. There's a phase that we're really interested in after that first step from the start. And most football players are using a 3-point stance for the start, one hand down. There's a transition phase as you then work into your top end speed. And before you know it, 40 yards is a blink of an eye. And most really high performing football players are probably just getting to top speed at around 40 yards. And if they had kept running, some of them could still reach a higher velocity, but the test is over. So you end up going through still all phases of sprinting, I guess you could say, and upright running. So that's how we look at it. And if we look at then having those phases, your start, your drive or acceleration phase, a transition phase into top end phase, we're training those all very independently. Then as we get better in each phase, we make sure we practice and rehearse them all together so that we have good coordination between the linking of those phases. So, at a basic level, it's got to be in phases.
I know that, I talked to Keegan Ross. I know the way you guys plan for the NFL Combine is a little bit different from the basic framework, but it still applies to the Exos framework. But how many times do you let your guys sprint for or do the linear speed work for the combine prep? I mean, between a week.
Linear speed, and if we just take, even for us, as you know, linear speed could mean absolute speed, top end, or acceleration, kind of that drive phase. So let's just say both of those together is linear speed. Between those two items, that's anywhere between 3 to 5 times a week. That's going to be practiced, rehearsed in different settings, different loading, and different activities throughout the week. So yeah, it's almost every day there's going to be something touched on there. Now remember, for the NFL Combine process, it's really condensed. It's only about 8 to 10 weeks. And so you really have a lot of dense workload being done in that time frame. And that would look a lot different, obviously, if it were something like, hey, you're in your off season as a football player, or baseball player, or basketball player. Now we're probably only looking at about 2 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week of linear speed work.
Nice. So, let's discuss from wide receiver running a 40-yard dash, and elite sprinter running for the 100-meter sprint, like DK Metcalf did. And I know you train with Nick Hill, am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
So what are the differences between training for 40-yard dash and training for 100-meter sprint?
Yeah, I'll give you my best answer, but I will definitely say this as a disclaimer. I've never worked with a professional sprinter, so I'm not a track and field coach. But I spent a lot of my career observing that, learn as much as I can. In fact, a lot of the way that I've learned to train speed has come from the track and field world. Lawrence Seagrave, Dan Paff, Stu McMillan, those types of individuals have given me the framework of what speed might look like for a football player or a basketball player. But that said, there are a lot of differences, obviously. And if we were just looking at 40-yard dash versus 100-meter race, one of the obvious notes is that the 100 meters is a lot longer. And so even as one element that comes into play for track and field is the element of race modeling, right? So as part of a race model, it may or may not be beneficial to achieve top velocities, maximum velocity, until around 55 to 65 meters, just as an example. The reason that would be perhaps good in a race model is because you got another 35 meters to go. So you don't want to waste all of your power output and then actually get super slow because you spent all of that energy in the front part of the race. So that might be a race model that some sprinters use. 40-yard dash, however, it wouldn't make sense for me in a 40-yard dash plan to elongate my phases so much that I only achieve top velocity at 55 meters. I would have missed my mark in the 40-yard dash. So one difference is the 100-meter race model gets a little shorter in a 40-yard dash. And so some sprinters in track and field world, their goal may not be accelerate as soon as possible to top speed. They may be trying to elongate that phase on purpose so they can last the whole 100 meters with the overall highest velocity. But in a 40-yard dash, that is not something you're interested in at all. You want to get to top speed as soon as humanly possible. You're not trying to elongate any type of race model. So that's one big difference. So the other big difference that I see is, at least in a 40-yard dash for American football, it's not reactive in the way that sprinters are either. So as you know, out of a block, sprinters go to a start gun. So they're reacting. American football 40-yard dash, you get set up, you wait till you're motionless, and the starter begins when you move. So there's no reaction component. That reaction component can be a huge difference in overall time. And it was probably something that DK Metcalf, as you gave your example, when he raced, that's something he had to really practice, was the reaction component. It wasn't really part of something that he had done very regularly, at least not any time recently, because of course he had run track before as he grew up. So those are two big differences. And that's in the beginning of the race, the acceleration phase. The other big difference, I think, is going to be on the end of the race, when you really need to rely on elasticity, short ground contact times, and maintaining them as much velocity as possible for as long as possible. 40-yard dash, that doesn't really come into the equation because it is such a short race that, essentially power, endurance, and that elasticity that you really need in a 100-meter dash is not as critical in the 40.
So can I understand it this way? For the 40-yard dash, like the Exos framework have categorized like different strength, different type of strength to work on from different different phases of the sprint in the 40-yard dash of the sprint. So the 40-yard dash is probably more tend to max strength or power, but for the 100-meter sprinter, after 30 meters, it's more of a plyometric elasticity.
Yes, and I would also add to that coordination, timing, and rhythm. So if I'm working with a football athlete, they play football. They're not track and field sprinters. They may have similar qualities of power, strength, etc., but these are almost two different animals. The football athlete, the type of animal that is aggressive, probably very powerful, but not always very fluid. So it ends up just being like raw power. It's like a rocket launching, just pure power. And that suffices enough to improve 40-yard dash, have a good time, all there to test well, show your speed qualities, and then go be a football player, right? A track and field sprinter has more art involved, more fluidity, more coordination, more rhythm, almost like a dancer. And there's a lot more intricacies then involved, nuance. And so that's why there's such a different approach usually in training the two. There's some crossover, some things that sprinters do help football players, perhaps some things that football players do help sprinters, but they're different enough that for the most part, the sprinter is going to be, like I said, you're going to see a lot more fluidity, coordination, and timing there, particularly at the ends of races where you can relax, be fluid, have a rhythm so that you're not too tense and essentially have too much of a high metabolic cost and you become fatigued. That really doesn't come into play for a 40-yard dash, which is like just run through a wall as hard as you can, fast as you can. Like I said, a rocket taking off.
I know that there are, in the last few years, there are more and more like company or like coaches focusing on the speed training in the state or overall the world. Let's say like Les Spillman, like artists you just mentioned, and tons of like coaches working off speed. So uh how does Exos stay at top of the game for like producing like a lot of like 4.3 seconds of guys in the NFL Combine?
Good question there, Eric. I think one of the secret sauces and things that we do really well at Exos, and other people do this well too, but like one of our strengths is having a multifaceted attack at improving something like a 40-yard dash so that they can produce at their best when it matters most. 4.3 40-yard dash is an example. And so what I mean by that is multifaceted. Performance, nutrition, physical therapy. It's not a super complicated or sophisticated formula, but many times the 4.3 is someone that has that within them already. It's pretty difficult to take a 4.7 type athlete and make them a 4.4 or 4.3 if that wasn't already there. And so you think about it like a sculpture as they are sculpting an object or a figure. Sometimes they think about it like they're just chipping away of what's already inside the rock. That's how a sculptor could think about it. They're just uncovering what's already there. So when you think about a 4.3 as a coach, I'm kind of just making sure that that person can be their best already, especially when I only have 8 to 10 weeks. I'm not taking someone and changing their entire physical prowess in 8 to 10 weeks, as you could imagine. These are 21, 22, 23-year-old people. They've been at it for a while. And so, coming back all the way around, a lot of times it's just making sure that you fine-tune a few things, not making it overcomplicated, not trying to change anything on a big scale, and then just make sure they're healthy. One year that I was working with the combine athlete, I had a 4.3 athlete. He ran a 4.3. And when he first arrived, he was running about a 4.4. So it was like, okay, this person is fast no matter what. Now you think about when they first arrived to us, it's just at the end of their season. They're not fresh. They're kind of beat up. They might have a little nagging injury from a full season, but they're definitely not fully recovered. And so part of the strategy of getting that person down to a 4.3 in 8 weeks wasn't about getting them stronger, improving their recovery cycle or elasticity at the end of the race. It was let's make sure that you're healthy and recovered and you can just go be you. So part of that is me making some fine tuning as a speed coach. A much larger part of that is our physical therapy team and our overall plan not to overwork them so they can start to recover, be fresh, and be themselves. So, that's just one example of how do you keep getting great results. You have therapists involved. You have an integrated approach, nutrition, which sometimes is your best speed coach. Because imagine running a 40 with 10 pounds of extra weight. And so the nutritionist can help you get lean, put on the right type of muscle mass, and not be carrying any unneeded weight. And then finally, the speed coach to fine tune.
Nice. Love this. So, like, for those like 8 to 10 week of like combine prep, exactly average it for average all of the like NFL players, how much faster did they get after the 10 to 8 weeks of combine prep?
That's really, I understand the question. It's pretty hard to answer, to be honest, because it's a big range. We're working with small, fast guys, defensive backs, all the way to offensive linemen, big, not as fast guys. They're not slow for sure, but they're not as fast. And so you can imagine then that an average between all of those types of players, it's hard to say exactly that you got 1/10 of a second here, you got 2/10 of a second here. So it's in that range of 1/10 of a second to sometimes half a second improvements. That would not be uncommon at all to see one of our 350-pound plus athletes come in running somewhere in the mid 5-second range, and then they get to combine sub 5 seconds, 4.9 in that range, and which is very impressive still. So you see how I could throw your average off half a second on one end, but only 1/10 of a second on the other. But that might give you an idea of the types of improvements that we see.
Nice. So since DK Metcalf have already like participated in 100-meter sprint, like do you guys are planning to expand it to like the track guys?
No, I don't think so. Just like I gave you the disclaimer, if we're not track and field, I'm not a track and field coach. We understand what we're good at, which is mostly in the sports performance range, to use things like speed development, but that's not in our expertise. It was really fun to see, though. And, we were all secretly rooting for him. And some of us started predicting the times that he would run. And we were all pleasantly surprised to see when he did run a lot faster than people thought he was going to run.
Nice. So, enough for the question about like performance training. I kind of want to jump out the question list and ask about like personally, you've been a strength and conditioning coach, and probably also been a management and now for running the facility, like from different position, what does it changes overall the year, and what do you learn the most?
From going from position to position like that, but still within the same industry, the biggest thing that I've learned and really acknowledged of what a coach can do long term may not come as a surprise. But in all of those positions, all of them require an ability to work well with other people. So because of that, the way that I used to coach as a young coach was focused on the athlete. What can I do best to support this athlete and help them achieve their goals? That is the same mindset and approach as managers would to help those people they manage, other employees. So, I mean, I think for me, that's been the big thing, is finding ways that could help improve the performance of others, whether or not it's things like speed development or strength development for an athlete, or it's making sure that the facility is in order and all the equipment is working as I help to improve the performance of a coach that works in the facility. So it really is kind of a coaching approach, no matter what. I might be coaching athletes, I might be coaching other coaches, like when I'm teaching, or I might just be trying to support the performance of a coworker.
Do you still teach the mentorship?
You bet.
Nice.
Yeah, I taught one earlier this year. And every once in a while, I still get to work with athletes too. I worked with an athlete in the last week, like one-on-one athlete.
Cool. So
once a coach, always a coach, Eric.
Yeah.
Once a coach, always a coach.
Still enjoy that, right?
That's right.
So the next question is, I know I probably asked this in the early conversation we did today, and you probably answered some of it, but still, throughout all these years, Exos from athletic performance, am I right? To
Yep.
Exos, and there's companies didn't make out to the COVID. So what exactly is Exos different from the others? Help you guys stay at the top of the industry.
This is more of a business question, so I really like this one. In business and in the marketplace of businesses, there will always be ups and downs with the economy. Times where you have a lot of customers, and times that you might have fewer customers. So one of the things that Exos has done well over the years to protect itself from the down times in the economy, where you might not have a lot of customers, is we have programs and deliver services to many different areas in many different ways. Some people would call that having a diversified way to essentially make a business. If I only had one way to make a business, I'm at more risk when things start to go up and down with the economy. And so because of that, Exos has been pretty resistant to business atmospheres that aren't so great, like COVID shutdowns, as an example. So you think about all the ways that Exos is in the industry helping people. Training athletes that are professional athletes, high school athletes, college athletes. So that's the athlete side of it. We also have a business component of coaching coaches, mentorships, and education. We also, like I mentioned when I first started with Exos, we have contracts with governments to train military personnel. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 ways to make money. The other one would be in our corporate clients. So you think about just basics like Google. And we have gym management structures working with Google, where we have Exos trainers at the Google buildings in their gyms. And so you have multiple ways of servicing multiple clients. That is just a strong, diversified way to create a business, so that if one goes down, another is there to keep you going when you need it. And if they're all up, even better. But for the most part, I think that's going to be a big difference between where you might see a training company, a performance company, go up and then down and then maybe not make it long term. Exos has been around for a long time, and part of that reason is because we're helping people in so many different ways.
Nice. So is it possible that after a few years besides like NFL Combine, you guys gonna work with Major League Combine and NBA Combine?
Definitely possible. In fact, it's maybe not as well known, but we do some NBA Combine prep programs. And yeah, I'm sure if the Major League Baseball really started doing that at a high level, and players knew that they had to do well at that combine to show what they got, we would have a program ready for them.
Nice, nice, nice. That's basically all the question I have for today. And at the last of the podcast, I want to show you something.
Okay.
Do you remember this one?
Oh yeah, that's an awesome book.
And do you remember this is you gave it to me. Do you remember this?
Yes, yes.
And there's this.
That's right. The great questions. You never stop with the great questions. So much now that you've done hundreds of podcasts asking questions. I love it.
Appreciate that, Victor. And one more thing I wanted to let you know. After I leave Exos, I started to after I leave Exos to Phoenix, Arizona, the mentorship, I started to work with tons of athletes in Taiwan. And I don't know if you remember that. When I was there, I asked you, like, after the mentorship, what can I learn or who can I learn from? You write down a whole whiteboard of names and like categories. There's like speed, there's like baseball, there's like overall fitness, there's like low back pain. And after that, I bought a lot of books and interviewed a lot of like the names on the whiteboard. So really appreciated what you've done for me, and I really learned a lot from.
Thank you for telling me that. I'm so glad to do that. And I've seen you do it. So it's one thing for you to ask me a question. I write down, hey, here's what I recommend. I'll tell you, Eric, I make a lot of recommendations. Not everybody has followed through like you have. So congratulations to you to really go into it full speed. Great job.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
You got it.